Welcome to Oneida Talks History and Genealogy. It's the 11th of July already. Wow.
All that I've been, every scar, every flaw, every place I've been, I'm still here breathing, still finding my way.
Yes.
Through the nights I thought I wouldn't see another day. Ain't nobody clapping for me, so I'm clapping for myself. All the times I held on when I needed help. Oh, I celebrate for everything I survived. All the nights I cried, but still I stayed alive. I celebrate me. Yeah, I'm standing on me. Even when it's hard, I'm who I need to be. Gotta do it for yourself. Ain't nobody coming through. You gotta find your strength, even when you don't want to. It's gonna be hard sometimes. It's gonna feel too much. You gon' break, you gon' cry, you gon' wanna give up. But believe me, you gon' make it, even when you can't see. You're stronger than the moment. You just gotta believe. I celebrate me.
Yes. Welcome to Oneida Talks History and Genealogy. And we're always, our people are always about song, whether we're indigenous, African, or these people, are a mixture of them. The indigenous people always had music, and those people who are enslaved, our ancestors, tried to take the music away. But we continue to stand on that, and I love it. And yes, I celebrate me, and I'm so grateful and thankful that this channel is growing. To all of you who have joined, to those of you who have subscriptions, and those of you who have paid subscriptions, if you can, please get a paid subscription, but don't stop tuning in. You can get a paid subscription. You can also donate through Venmo at ANITA-WILLS-4. And you can also purchase my books. That helps. You can also purchase my merch. I have merchandise, and yeah. So today I want to go into my mother's paternal side. My grandfather Martin, who was my mother's father, and he was my grandfather, of course, but his name was Charles Martin. But I'm not necessarily talking about Charles as much as I am the people that he came from. So I'm talking about Charles's father, who was my great grandfather, William Penn Martin, and we have a lot of like Charles, my grandfather. His middle name was Frederick, so he was Charles Frederick Martin, and but I believe that was Frederick Douglass. That middle name was from Frederick Douglass. And then we have my great-grandfather, and his name was William Penn Martin. So these were indigenous people who, the Martins, and they're the groups that, the people they met, the families that they married into, like the Martins and the Greens and the Davises. They were all in a marrying, and they were all basically the same. They were all tribal members, or have at least one family member who was indigenous, and banding together to survive. So William Penn Martin, my great-grandfather, I talked about him the other day. He was a rancher. So I'm talking about him because the fact that he was, King Ranch was, you would say it was a corporation, that they were big business back then. This is in the early 1900s, because my William Penn Martin, he was born about 1860? Yeah, I think he was born around 1860 and he died around 1925. That was, and his parents, Uriah and Tamsin Page Martin, were both natives from the region. And when I say the region, Tamsin, my great-great-grandmother, was born in Burlington, New Jersey, on the Brotherton Reservation. It's called, they, meaning Europeans, call it the Brotherton Reservation. And the Brotherton Reservation is also known as Edgepelick. And it's in Burlington County, New Jersey. And it was established in 1758 through the Treaty of Easton. It was the very first Native American reservation in the United States. The reservation was created as a localized safe haven for the Lenape as European colonists expanded through New Jersey, spanning approximately 3,000 acres in present-day Shamong Township, historically Indian mills. The community relied on gristmills, sawmills, and farming under the oversight of a missionary, the Reverend John Brainerd. They were moving them off their land and into Brotherton. So Tamsin was actually Mohawk, and they were being run, they were being run off of their land up in northern New York, So she wound up in Brotherton, maybe brought there by the missionaries or whatever, and she's part of that Lenape reservation, but she was not Lenape, she was Mohawk. The community struggled to adapt to stationary agricultural life. They were not stationary people. They were, they moved around like from village to village, and it said it led to poverty and a decline in population. So I could see why my ancestor Tamsin Page would be working as a domestic in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. That's where she met Uriah, her husband. He was also working on this on a big farm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He was a laborer and she was a domestic, and that's where they met. But what they were doing was they were moving these people, my ancestors, off the land and causing them to live, to become poverty-stricken. Because they had if you're not on your land, you have to go by what these people are saying, or these people's rules. They have to become Christians. That's the first thing. They force them to, you either starve to death or you come here and you work the land. See, when they're talking about they were stationary agriculture, that's slavery. That's slavery. When I'm saying to my audience that the natives were enslaved to take them from their lifestyle where they moved at will from village to village, and to set them in, on land that you done took from some other tribe, or either you set yourself in the middle of another tribe, and you're bringing other native people on there, and then you're telling them they have to be sedentary. They can't move. They can't go anywhere. And they're talking about it caused them to be in poverty. They weren't in poverty before Europeans arrived. That's my point. So, so this is some background on who my great-great-grandmother was. Uriah Martin, her husband, he was born in Chester County. And right there in Chester County, there was a reservation. So there's this Okie tract that Queen Aliquippa negotiated with 500 acres with William Penn around 1704. He told her that they would set aside 500 acres for the people, the native people who had been run off their land. She went to the Ohio Valley and brought back a lot of the natives that had run off. Not just her, but the Iroquois Federation, and brought them back, and he negotiated that land with William Penn. He told her they can live on this land, and it belongs to them and their heirs into infinity. That's what, and they wrote it down. So what happened was, as soon as William Penn left, then what happens is they come in when William Penn left and went back to England, and the settlers that were coming from Europe came and again ran them off their land, and they're still there, those settlers. It's in Willistown, Westtown. I looked at an old map, and it says right there where the Okie spread is, which is now Williston and Westtown. It says Indian Village. It says Indian Village. So when they returned, when I'm saying they, I mean like when Tamsin was there and Uriah, they were in Lancaster County, which is the other county over, which was formerly Chester County, by the way. So there were, their village is right on that border. The village, the native village, they call Lenape or whatever, and it was right on the border of Lancaster and Chester County, and so they would be in Lancaster, and then they would be in Chester County, and after Uriah served in the Civil War, in 1860 he married Tamsin. Then he was in the Civil War, and they went back to Chester County, back to that land that I'm telling you about, Lewistown, Weston. But they went back as, again, servants. He served in the Civil War and came back, and the only job that he could get was as a, they, how they go in, they dig in pits and things like that. That's what he was doing. They had to do labor. He came back and was a laborer. Tamsin was a midwife, and she was a midwife to the Quakers. The Quakers were the ones that got benefit of that land. They're still on it, by the way. Ain't that something? How we, clap and acknowledge the people that's still on it, and don't even want to talk about the indigenous people whose land was stolen, whose land was, who were pushed off their land. And some of them, like my family members, were Quakers. They were accepted as Quakers. So they were I think that they split up. The Quakers split up because there was, some of them that did not want Negroes, mulattoes, they were calling them colors or whatever. They had redesignated them, and they didn't want them in their church. So there was a split in the Quakers church. But my grandfather, he went to the Quaker school. Like my mother said, he went there until the 10th grade, and his parents, William Penn Martin, he went to Quaker school too. You know, um, Lydia, who was the wife of William Penn, Lydia Green Martin, those their people were being converted into Mennonites, so they were becoming Mennonites. You know, so this is you know, this is parts that we don't talk about. You know, each one of these religions was going onto native lands and taking the land and getting the land, and then some of it, and intermixing with the native people. And so, there's people that's related who are, when I say that I have people in my family who are passing as white, yeah, there are. But would I say their names or who they are or point them out? No. That's their life. It's not. I'm not interested in uncovering, pointing out who, what, and where. I think that all of that takes care of itself. You know, it's according to whether you are passing as white, and then you're racist, knowing that you're passing. That's on your conscience. You know. Uh, yeah, my mother would say, I have white cousins, and they'll walk right by me and won't speak. Um, you know, and we knew who they were, but we don't go around telling on them. They have to tell on themselves, especially if they're more racist than the original Europeans who came here. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to, so Tamsin Page Martin, she was a midwife, and she delivered a lot of the Quaker children in Westtown, in Williston, Chester County. And Uriah, he worked in the pits. He was like a brick cutter or something like that. Like he was working. They were in the quarry. Yeah, it was a quarry. So Lincoln, they were taking bricks to Lincoln. They were taking out bricks for Lincoln University. So this was a lot of people were around this time. They were building Lincoln University, which is in Chester County, and that's what he did. He worked in a quarry, breaking up bricks, and they were being taken to and that was, I think that the prominent one was Tamsin, and Charles, Uriah's father, he was also working in Lancaster County, where all the Quakers were, that they gotten land, the land that was promised to indigenous people, wound up in Quakers' hands or wound up in the Dutch, whoever else came in with guns. Well, the Quakers didn't come in with guns, but they are on that land. And yeah, why can't we talk about land? And another thing I want to bring up is that I actually believe, as far as reparations, I support us joining with the Caribbeans, with whoever else has the balls to go to the UN and demand reparations. I think that we are stronger together. And whether you personally like, you don't have to personally like people in the Caribbean. This is business, and we need to learn how to take care of business. We don't have to personally like Ghana, Ghanaians or whatever. Like, what have they done to me? I can't say I've had a bad experience with any African. So what if they have an attitude? Black folks over here have attitudes too. Indigenous people over here have attitudes too. I think people have attitudes. And don't nobody have worse attitudes than YTE folks towards us. And we need to take care of business and stop letting them divide and conquer. So if we're joining, we can have our own organization, our own federation, and join with the Caribbean and with the people from Ghana and whoever else want to come in as indigenous and as African people of African descent, and go to that United Nations and demand reparations and set up our own organization where we tell Africa, the countries in Africa, or any other country that wants to listen, not to do business with the imperialists until they sit down and negotiate reparations with us. Why don't we do that instead of fighting each other and talking about Africans own slaves? Africans own slaves. Africans did not create slavery. That was created in Europe. I'm not saying that Africans didn't have, wars and stuff. And usually when they have wars, if you lost, you were absorbed by the tribe that you were fighting. That's not slavery, because you could still, eventually you're going to be free, and you can still marry within that tribe that absorbs you. The same thing with natives. But the thing about natives and Africans was they didn't go around killing women and children. They would fight man to man. Although there were women warriors in Africa, but they were fighting the colonists, the people coming in. If they were selling their own people, why were they fighting fighting the Europeans as they came in? So, I'm not saying that it didn't happen at all. I'm saying it wasn't created in Africa. And slavery was not created here in the United States. That's something that the Europeans, created. Okay? So, and there's the Treaty of Easton was how the reservation in New Jersey was created. So we have a Lewis and Jane Martin who were, I believe they were Charles Martin, who is my great-grandfather. I believe they were his parents. They were, Lewis was a basket maker. And he lived in the mountains. He was in the Welsh Mountains, and he stayed there quite a while, him and Jane. And then they went back to the Brotherton Reservation. And Charles wound up staying in Lancaster and Chester County, and he's the father of Uriah Martin, who is my great-great-grandfather, and Charles is my great-great-great-grandfather. So I'm talking to, folks, to you all about, this journey of putting all these people together, and not only putting them together, but then putting their story together, because the story was scattered. They were left out of a lot of the documents, but you can see there's a gap, and I can see that there's a question here that's not being answered. And so I would go and I would pursue it. And I asked my mother, I said, what was, she was saying, well, Tamsin because we have, Tamsin is a name that is popular on my mother's side of the family. And she said great-great-grandmother Tamsin was Mohawk, and that they had been run down into New Jersey, and then they came to Chester County. And I think that she came to Chester County to work, because they were being starved off the reservation, like it says right here. They were being, they said that there was issues because the natives did not want to do farming, agriculture, sedentary farming. That's slavery. I'm sorry. Especially when they're saying these people are on our land, the Brothertons. Y'all understand that? Okay. So, and William Penn Martin was my great-grandfather. He was named after my great-uncle, William Penn Martin. My great-great-uncle, William Penn Martin, was in the Civil War out of Chester County. I think he was in the 45th United States Contra. So he was in the Civil War out of Chester County, and he was a corporal. And then he had gotten, for a minute, they gave him, the rank of sergeant. And then they turned around and took it from him because they said, oh, he's not what he appears to be. These people are extremely light-skinned. They're like I said, they're indigenous, they're native people. And they thought they were white. They were mixed with white. And so they stripped him of that. And I saw the roster. When I'm saying that, that means that I've seen where they said he's not what he appears to be. And that's William Penn Martin, who is my great-grandfather's uncle. And he was in the United States Colored Troops. They all went to Texas. They left, I think they trained at William Penn, and I know that William went to fought to Texas within the United States Colored Troops, and he went all the way to Texas. And then, so did great-great-grandpa Henry Green, who was in the Civil War. He went all the way to Texas too, and they fought. They had several battles that they were in. They were part of winning battles, by the way. And so this is how I make, I connect to the people and everything. But my great-grandfather William Penn, he was a rancher on the land where they were, where my ancestors were indigenous, where they were native in Pennsylvania. He was a rancher at West Marlborough, which is right there where the reservation was. So and he worked for the Darlingtons, and the Darlingtons were Quakers. They got massive amounts of land. He did business with the Darlingtons, and then he was a rancher, prominent rancher for the King family. So when they talk about cowboys, he was a cowboy, because not only was he a rancher, but my mother would say that every couple of years or so they did a cattle run from Pennsylvania to the King Ranch, and they wanted the cattle. They had a special brand of cattle that they were raising, and they wanted the King Ranch, the King folks. They wanted their cattle to not to be on a train, but to travel. because it made their meat more tender. It made them more tender, you know, when they went to the, you know, when they butchered them and they sold them and stuff. This was a high quality brand of cattle that my grandfather was raising and getting to the King family ranch. And he lived on what was formerly Indian land here in Chester County, and the King Ranch people, it was sold to the King Ranch people. And so he was living on his own indigenous ancestral land, working it for somebody else's benefit. And they were, him and great grandmother Lydia raised, you know, they only had one son who was my grandfather, but they had foster children that stayed with them. They had relatives, children who were living with them. So they had a lot of people, you know, that they were taking care of in the community. And this was in the early 1900s, you know, that they were doing this. And it's not really commendable, you know, because we don't get recognition for doing what white folks get recognition for doing. Like the Darlingtons, if you say their name, they had all kinds of land, and they had, my mother worked for them because they had what they called it, like skilled nursing facilities or something, where they were taking care of older people. They also had a children's home, and you know, their name is still prominent in that region. And I found that one of my Martins married into the Darlington family. So, but I don't know where they disappeared to, you know, where the children, because there was a Martin man, so the woman was a Darling, so she would be a Martin. You know. And it says that the historical records, the archaeological finds, and local lore indicate there were many Lenape villages and camps in the general area of Chester County. A documented Lenape village, and I'm going to missay this, Quino Minsing, which means place of the long fish, was situated along the big bend of the Brandywine. So the village, we lived not too far from the Brandywine River. So the village was right by the Brandywine River. And it was just east of what is now Route 100, where it crosses the Pennsylvania-Delaware line. See? Although no documented Lenape villages have been found in Westtown, there are several sites in the township where artifacts such as arrowheads and other stone tools have been found, indicating that Native American people had camped or hunted in what is now their township. Arrowheads and sharpened stones were found on the old Warbish property in Westtown, now Arborview, many years ago. In recent years, several arrowheads have been discovered in Pleasant Grove. Well, we could have told them. We knew. My mother knew. Her father knew. But they didn't, you know, they're not communicating. The only way they communicate is with laws and guns against us. And there's a C.A. Wisliger's book titled A Red Man on the Brandywine. He states that archaeological evidence supports the existence of villages or camps at Chad's Ford, Britton's Bridge, Pocopson, Lenape Park, Volosat, Northbrook, Emeryville, Coachville, Glenmore, and Honeybrook. And a lot of those places that I just named, the Darlingtons or other Quakers own that land. And in Emeryville, there's a mental health. There used to be a place, like a nursing home that the county took over. So Emeryville is in Chester County, and so is Pocopson. These are all nursing homes. The reason I know is that my mother and my aunts worked in those nursing homes back in the day. Okay, so they found archaeological evidence that supports the existence of villages or camps at Chad's Ford, Britton's Bridge, Hobson, Lenape Park, Wallacet, Northbrook, Emeryville, Coatesville, Glenmore, and Honeybrook. And all of those areas were our, where we lived or where we went to, like Lenape, there was a park there that we used to go to. Have family. My mother was born and raised in Honeybrook. All of these are our running grounds. Where my mother and her family played. My grandfather, So it's just really interesting. And the Great Makewood Path was mainly a fur trading route used by the Makewood or Susquehannock people. The trail led from the Susquehanna River near Conestoga, approximately 80 miles to the Schuylkill River near Philadelphia. After crossing through Westchester, the trail passed through Westtown and eventually on to Philadelphia, bringing Native Americans from central Pennsylvania through the township. By the mid-1800s, 19th century, most of the native people left the area for present-day Ohio and other western lands, forced out by treaties with the Europeans who settled the original people's land. There was no treaty. I'm sorry. The Europeans have never honored the treaty. There was no treaty. We were still there. My grandfather, his father, their father, we were all there, renamed mulatto. So that is always what I keep coming back to, is when they're saying, oh, they left. And even if those who left, like some of our family members, were ran up into Canada. Yeah, some of them did leave. Some of them did go to Ohio. I have DNA cousins who are indigenous who are in Ohio. And it's interesting enough, they show up more in my brother's line, in my brother's DNA than mine. But yes, we have people like the Brothertown Indian Nation that I belong to in Virginia. They are, they're Sioux. They're the Sioux, the Great Sioux Nation. So the Sioux are from the Ohio Valley. Or they say they're from the Ohio Valley. They may have been run there or run from there into North Carolina, where that line of my family was originating or coming from back in the 1600s. So, so this is what, when people, when I talk to people and I tell you, look up your family, wherever you came from, find out as much as you can about the history. If you're looking for your ancestors, your people, find out as much as you can about the history of that region, because that is how you make the connections and how you find the people that you're looking for. And so, yeah. And I want to, to keep, don't give up. Don't give up. There's information out there. You just have to, they don't teach us, they don't teach us to do critical thinking, but we, as people who have to survive, we know how to do critical thinking because that's what we had to use to survive. So we're not waiting for them to tell us to do critical thinking. because we sit up and do critical thinking all the time. When in church you do it at work. In order to survive, we had to do critical thinking, and we can do that, So I hope that you guys, that what I'm talking about brought up questions or helped you, get a little further along on your journey. So I'm going to close with that. And if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to, to contact me or to, put your comment down, and we'll try to, go over your questions that you have to see if we can help you move along with that. Okay, have a good day, and I will be checking with y'all soon.